I'm a designer. And a few years ago, 2 years ago, my group at the University of California, San Diego, was asked by the American National Cancer Institute and the Federal Communications Commission to look at the cancer rates in an area of the United States that has the lowest penetration of high bandwidth internet and the highest rate of cancer, and for that matter, heart disease and diabetes. It's located in eastern Kentucky, which is the eastern range of mountains in the United States. Okay, but I'm a psychologist. And what am I going to do to solve these issues? Designers have done a lot of interesting things, but you know, what do designers do? Designers design, well, cell phones. I have a really nice pencil I like, a wooden barrel. These are very nice, they're beautiful, and good designers make beautiful, wonderful things that make our lives more pleasant. But we're talking here about very complex socio-technical systems. The problem of cancer in eastern Kentucky, or for that matter, any place in the world, and the problem of homelessness, and the problem of hunger, and the problem of education, healthcare, public health, these are major complex issues that involve a large range of issues. So how can psychologists or designers, or for that matter, any single discipline, approach these problems? So I believe that in order to do this, we need a new form of design, 21st century design. Today, design has many, many different meanings. There's engineering design, and they build wonderful bridges. The architecture, build wonderful buildings. The traditional area of design really comes out of art schools. And here the people are trained in wonderful craftsmanship that make the beautiful items that we all love to use. But today we have other kinds of problems. A good example, by the way, is the modern Apple computer, which is beautiful and wonderful. The iPhone is beautiful and wonderful, and every year it's more difficult to use, because the kind of skills it takes to make a beautiful, created, manufactured object don't take into account human behavior. And the current people at Apple don't understand human behavior, and words are ugly. And so to put words on the screen, it destroys the beauty of the screen. But it's words that help us know what to do. So we need a new kind of designer who's sensitive to these things. It's actually amusing, because I was one of those new kinds of designers at Apple Computer. I was a vice president there. And actually, in the old days, Apple computers, you never had to open the manual. You could always understand it. But today, you have to read the manual. And that doesn't help. So what is this new kind of designer, though? And what are the problems that we have to face? And why do we have to change the things? It's because the problems we're talking about are big and huge. We want to be able to address these very complex problems. But this involves economics, finances, education, politics, infrastructure. We need people who are able to work across all these areas. The aid community in the world addresses these very same issues. But over the many past decades, they have spent many billions of dollars, very often with very little impact. And why is that? So the aid people are intelligent, they understand the issues, but their impact has been limited. So as I think about how we are going to approach these issues, I have to be very careful to be aware of the fact that many intelligent, extremely good people have not been able to make much of a dent. And why is that? Well, there are kind of two ways you can think about providing aid to a community. One of them is the more traditional way with external experts, domain knowledge experts. And this is a photograph actually taken in my laboratory of a real domain expert. He's a cancer specialist from the University of Kentucky Cancer Center. So the external experts are good. And they often come in, and what you do is you study a problem, and then you make a major proposal which is maybe involves billions of dollars and decades of time. And it's not that it's a bad proposal. However, it's insensitive to the local issues and the local communities in which it's going to be deployed. Doesn't understand the culture, don't understand the resources and the skills that already exist. And you can't. If you go into a country for a few weeks or even for a year or two, you cannot understand all of these nuances. So there's another approach, and that's to rely upon community expertise. And that's, the local community often has people who have lived there and are trained in some of these skills. And so these are the people who really do understand what the limitations and powers are of the local community. They have problems too, though, because they are approaching very large problems in a very small scale. And so quite often you will find very clever people who have solutions to some of the issues that they face, a new kind of water pump in places where water is scarce, or a new way of treating diseases, or a new way of keeping out mosquitoes in malaria areas. But that's a very small segment of the entire problem. And so the local community has trouble scaling. The global community, the top-down experts, understand the problems of scale, but they don't understand the local community. So you'd think that the solution is to merge these two approaches, merge the community people and the top-down people. Well, the problem here is that they often speak different languages. And I don't mean English versus some other language. What I mean is they come from different technologies and different specialties and different training, and so they don't often understand each other. But even if you could merge them so they're working together, there's another major problem in these issues, and that's that large projects often fail. And the reason that large projects often fail is for two reasons. One of them is they are really large. And if you try to understand all the different issues that are involved, this diagram, you can't read it, but you aren't supposed to. What it simply shows is that for the simple problem of obesity, being overweight, there are just a huge number of different variables all interconnected. And this diagram is, first of all, an oversimplification. And second, doesn't talk about some of the real issues, which is the feedback loops. So when you have a large project, you have large amounts of feedback. Look at climate control. The act that we do today may not have an impact until a decade from now. So it's very difficult to understand the impact and very difficult to reward citizens for doing the correct thing when they see no result. Recycle all of your goods. Well, okay, if you can understand the recycling instructions, which I can't, by the way. Recycle, and then what is the impact of that? We don't see it, it's not visible. And so feedback loops can be immediate. If I do something and I get an immediate response, good, now I understand. But what if I do something and it takes an hour for a response, or it takes a day, or worse, it takes a decade? This makes these problems very, very difficult. On top of that, some of the feedback may actually end up being negative. So the things I do today that locally improve may do harm in the long run, but it isn't noticed for a while. So a major problem is that. A second major problem is simply that they're very expensive. They're very big. They involve a large number of people, and they will impact a large number of people. And once you try to do anything that impacts a large number of people, you will help a large number, but you will also harm a reasonable number. And these people object legitimately, and you end up with a very difficult political problem that has to be solved. And then finally, if you have a project that's going to take 10 years, during those 10 years, the issues will have changed. New technologies have emerged, new social issues have arisen, and yet you're stuck with this massive project. So what is the solution? Well, in 1959, a political scientist, Charles Lindblom, wrote a paper about incrementalism, that the way to approach these complex problems is with small, incremental, and opportunistic approaches. And that's an approach that we have adopted. He wrote a paper, and the editor of the journal said, that's a horrible title. So he invented a new title called The Science of Muddling Through. And what is meant by this is you take a problem like, well, the cancer problem in eastern Kentucky, the United States, or the climate change problem, and you try to analyze it, and you try to understand what has to be done, this very large, major set of activities. But then, instead of saying, let's go and do them, where there'll be lots of opposition, you wait for an opportunity to do a small step in the correct direction. Because the small step avoids the political fights, allows you to test your ideas, and if it works, that makes it easier to do the next small step and the next small step. And if it fails, you don't get a great big public opposition. Look, all these works and it failed. People don't even notice. And more important, you can treat it like a scientist treats failure. When I was a scientist, I never failed. And here's why. I would say, I've been working for a year on this problem and it didn't work out. So let me try something different. I didn't say I've been working for a year and I failed. I said, no, that was a good learning experience. I learned a lot, and now let me do something different. And this attitude, though, is the attitude that designers like to have. Designers say, we like to fail. We, in fact, plan to fail, because that's how we learn. But you can only do that if you're doing small things. You don't dare do that with the big, expensive things. So what we want to do is muddle through. We want to combine the top emphasis and the bottom emphasis, but do small, incremental planning. So let me now talk about what we're going to try to do, or what we are doing in eastern Kentucky in the United States. So that's the area. It's in the middle of the mountains. There are very narrow roads. It's difficult to travel. In the winter, it snows, and people can be snowed in for as much as 2 months. And the best medical care is not very far away in distance, but 3 or more hours away in time. So as we said, the National Cancer Institute and the FCC said, please come in and help. And we have on the right part of that slide, the University of Kentucky Cancer Center, and the left part, my group, the University of California, San Diego Design Lab, where we are introducing people-centered design. And we're going to work on this together. Now, why is the Federal Communications Commission here? Why are they involved in the project? Because they said, look, there's no internet to speak of. And if you had the internet, you could do telemedicine, remote medicine, and people could wear sensors and send them back to the University of Kentucky Medical Center, where they could be analyzed, and if there was an immediate problem, they would get feedback. Well, that's true, but there's an old saying in the United States from a journalist many, many years ago. Every difficult, complex problem has a simple answer. A simple answer that's neat, that's elegant, and that's wrong. These kinds of difficult problems do not have single causes, and they do not have single solutions, which is why we have to do them slowly and understand the complexity of the issue. So this is what it looks like. This is a town, and it has severe economic, political, and social problems. And a major issue is that the major occupation was coal mining. And basically, there's no more coal mining, which means there's no more jobs, which means that they're an isolated community where the jobs have all gone away. People are drinking too much and smoking too much and eating inappropriate foods and not getting much exercise and very depressed. It's not a medical problem. It's a complex socio-technical problem, right? It involves political, economic, social, all sorts of issues. So how do we approach that? Well, as I said, we're We're going to start off trying to understand the whole problem, and that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. We've been working there, we've been meeting with the people. We hired an anthropologist to spend the year going through and understand the real issues. But the real issues are already understood by the local health service workers. And so we have to use them. And so what's the role of the designer in all of this? Well, designers are kind of interesting because in many ways, designers don't know anything. And that's a virtue. Because when we try to do a project, any real project requires knowing about the expertise from many, many different disciplines. And we have to bring them together. In fact, the university is our largest enemy because university trains very narrow specialties. And in fact, to be promoted in a university, in a modern research university in the world, you have to demonstrate you're one of the top leaders in your specialty. And the best way to be the top leader in a specialty, this was my trick, the best way to be the best in the world was to be the only person in the world. It's a bit tricky. It has to be something that people care about. But the point being, the more narrow you are and the more expert you are, the more you're promoted. But when you want to do a real problem, we have to put together many different domains, specialized domains from health, from economics and social studies, community experts, political experts, economic experts. And the designer is the person who brings them together and learns the common language because we don't know anything. We don't pretend that we know the answers, but we're fast learners to know who we have to bring together. And so bringing the design skills, and now the community and the experts can work together. And so what the experts do is they facilitate and provide platforms and tools. The right platform can make a huge difference. And the local community, though, they're the ones who do the designs. And they are creative, and they understand the local culture. But again, we're going to be opportunistic in the problems we approach, or better yet, that's the wrong way to put it, opportunistic in the problems they will approach. Because the work is going to be done, and it has to be done by the local community. When an outside expert comes in and says, here's what you must do, why would the community believe that? The community believes it best when it comes from themselves. So 21st century design is, well, we have to address complex socio-technical issues. But we focus upon the people. We recognize that this is a human-centered problem, and the human-centered design process has 4 major considerations. We make sure we solve the real problem and not the symptom. The local community, by the way, with lots of experts, they will tend to solve the symptoms. And so we have to help them actually go beneath the symptoms to try to get to the core issues. Second, it's a system. Solving one little piece does not solve the problem. In fact, solving a little piece can make it worse because local optimization does not necessarily lead to global optimization. So we have to instruct and teach how to look at the whole system. And you have to focus upon the people. A lot of the work that is being done optimizes, but it optimizes for money or productivity as opposed for the experience of the people who are involved. And finally, we expect that we will be wrong. And therefore, we design that way. We design to be flexible so that when things aren't working out right, we can step back and say, okay, let's take another look at this and try something different. And so there's where the modern 21st century design is, where the designers are basically intermediaries between parties. So that's our project. We're about to initiate a project, again in Kentucky, in Africa with the World Food Organization, in the environment, which will be across the world, and in India. And in fact, on Wednesday, I'm flying to India and spending a few weeks, not enough to understand what's going on, but we have partners in India who will be leading this program, and so it's a chance to work with these partners. And we also seek major partners to move this forward. So thank you very much.